Hi, this is Astro Girish here, and thank you for tuning into my channel. This is an Astro channel, and I'm taking the extension of the retrograde series that I've been doing for the past few days. All right. So for those who have come to my channel for the first time, I would request you to go through the links below in the description for all the other videos that I've done on retrograde planets. One on retrograde introduction, and then again all the other retrograde planets individually that I've done. I've also explained what is retrograde planet. So my humble request to the audience is to please go through them, and then of course you can certainly run through this video also, right? At the same time, I would request the audience to subscribe and like this channel, as I would be coming out with more videos on astro learning and even on various predictions and consultation. So this would help you to stay updated with the channel, right? Yes, for those who are interested to learn astrology under me, you can also get in touch with me. The details are given in the description. You can either drop me an email or drop me a WhatsApp message seeking for the details. At the same time, yes, for those who want a one-on-one consultation, you can also get in touch with me through WhatsApp and or just drop me an email for an appointment, right? So today I would be talking about a retrograde planet, and the retrograde planet is going to be on Mars, right? The question should be, what happens when Mars is retrograde in your natal chart? Mind you, I'm not bringing the transit chart or the transit effect in this video because it becomes too elongated. But yes, at least when it is in the natal chart, how should you read the effects of retrograde Mars in a natal chart, right? Now, before getting into that, let us understand what does a role Mars plays in a natal chart, or generally what does Mars as a planet play a role. See, Mars is for desire, right? It's a very important planet when it comes to desire. It has got a negative shade which we'll cover a little later, but Mars as a planet plays a very important role in chasing your desire, right? It is a masculine energy. So if you're a sports player, or if you are into physical activities, the position of Mars is very important. Again, let me bring this point very clearly for those who are coming to my video for the first time. When I say position of Mars or position of any planet in the natal chart, it is not exaltation, it is not debilitation, it is not even combust. Trust me, these three concepts are highly misplaced. Many people do not know how to read them. If a planet is exalted, debilitated, or even combust, in reality they don't play much of a role. Okay, you have to see the other combinations, of which nakshatras are very important, right? So those who have learned those who have learned astrology under me would know how to read a chart where the emphasis on the nakshatras are given along with the rashis and the bhavas, right? So so when I say the position of Mars, the placement of Mars in the natal chart is very important. Again, please understand the importance is emphasized on D1 chart, not on any of the division charts, right? So if your D1 chart, if you're thorough in reading your D1 chart, your prediction can be as high as 90 to 95%. So always emphasis on the D1 chart and the position of planets in the D1 chart, right? So coming back to the point, what does Mars as a planet do? Okay, so other than being desire, other than being a masculine planet, Mars is also important because it is a Bhumi Karaka. It is the sun of the soil. So if you want to own a property, you need to have a connection with Mars. How? I'll explain in the videos to come, right? So Mars is also indicates Bhatru Karaka. It symbolizes siblings. Okay, so the position of Mars is very important. That will talk about your relationship with your siblings. Okay, so as usual, I always connect planets with the bhavas and then I give the prediction. So let us understand the effects of retrograde Mars among the 12 bhavas, or how does it affect all the 12 bhavas whenever they get connected, right? So let's see what happens when retrograde Mars gets connected with the first house or the first bhava. As you know, the first house or the first bhava is a Tanu bhava, right? It talks about yourself. So there would be some shortcoming in you when it comes to your personality. Okay, when I say shortcoming, it does not mean it's a negative connotation. Okay, either you'll be too temperamental, to quote an example, or you can be too emotional, right? Or again, you may not understand certain things in the first go, right? Probably you may take some more time to understand any concept. So these are some of the problems when you have a retrograde planet in the first house. Add to that, if you have Mars in the first house, this problem is commonly seen, right? Yes, you are very short tempered if you have a retrograde planet, retrograde Mars in the first house. Mars itself is aggression, right? And a retrograde Mars means suddenly you will lose your temper for no reason. Okay, sometimes for no reason, sometimes for some irritation of the slightest order, right? You can be belligerent in your attitude. I've seen people being very belligerent. Ladne badne ke liye they are all ready, especially if you have a retrograde Mars getting connected with the first house. Okay, if you're a sports player, a retrograde planet in the first house will have a problem. In general, for sports player or anybody who's into physical activity, they have a retrograde Mars, they're going to have a problem, right? The desired results can never be expected. But yeah, it is not that severe. It can be corrected to some extent. So the remedy part, I'll be covering it later. Okay, so these are some problems that you will see when retrograde Mars gets connected with the first house. Okay, now let's go and see what happens when retrograde Mars connects with the second house. Okay, see, second house is the apart from your face, second house is also the house where you have your eyesight. Okay, so all those people who are into investigative business, Mars plays a very important role if it gets connected with the second house or with the eighth house. Okay, why with the eighth house? I'll talk when we come to the eighth house. But second house, why? Because you have to see through, right? So you need to have the eye of details, right? So all those people who are into police or any kind of an investigative activity, including the military, okay, or any area where you have to do a detailed study or a detailed understanding of what the crime is, how the crime is, who has committed the crime, So for them, if you have a retrograde Mars connecting with the second house, you are likely to face problems. Why or how? What kind of problems? Your perfection can be misplaced sometimes. I've seen people going wrong in the judgment. They read too much of the details and then they go wrong. Okay, so retrograde planet in the second house, that too if you're into an investigative business, is going to be problematic. Okay, you need remedies to get corrected. Okay, and let me remind you, remedy doesn't mean wearing gemstone. Gemstone is not a remedy. Okay, gemstone is not always a remedy. I won't say it is not a remedy, but it is not always a remedy. So do not be in the conception that, I have a retrograde Mars, so let me wear a gemstone and a red coral and try to rectify it. It doesn't work like that, right? So this is one problem when you have a retrograde Mars connecting with the second house, especially for those who are into investigative business. Now, what happens to those who are into the normal business, right? See, in normal terms, I've seen people having a retrograde Mars connecting with the second house. They will have a very erratic language. Many a time they are very abusive. Many a time they are very straightforward. They lack the diplomacy that is needed when you need to please somebody, right? So, very common problem when you have a retrograde Mars getting connected with the second house. Again, your interest to have spicy food is very high, okay, or maybe too high to have the meat products. Consumption of non-vegetarian food is very high when you have a retrograde Mars getting connected with the second house. Okay, it becomes excessive. In general, if you have a Mars connecting with second house, a direct motion Mars, you still have an interest in spicy food, especially red chilies, or red meat. Okay, nothing wrong, but it should not be in excess. If it becomes in excess, you're likely to have problems of cholesterol, you're likely to have problems of blood pressure. So I've seen people having a retrograde Mars connecting with the second house. They have food addiction to do with spicy food and to do with non-vegetarian food. Also, they suffer from blood pressure or even cases of there have been cases of even fissures and piles, these kind of problems that they face. Okay, so be very careful with your diet, right? Now let's see what happens when Mars gets connected with the third house. See, most astrologers do not know. When you say third house, you talk about hands, right? But when you talk about hands, you have the shoulder, you have the joints, you have the fingers, you have the wrist. Okay. When third house gets connected with Mars, it talks about your fingers. Third house plus Mars is nothing but fingers. Okay, many astrologers do not know this. Okay, or at least they don't speak open in public. But I believe that you should educate the audience. So when you have the third house getting connected with Mars, normally people have a tendency to play some instrument. Either they play a guitar or they are very good with playing string instruments like piano. I've seen people having excellent drawing habits. Okay, these are some qualities, especially with your hand gestures or your finger, the fine prints of your fingers comes into picture. But unfortunately, if you have a retrograde Mars, you will still be good in these areas, but the fine tuning would be missing. So you may have to put some extra effort in improving these fine tunings, right? Again, your third house talks about Bhatrustan, your siblings. If you have a younger sibling, because third house deals with younger sibling, and if you have a retrograde Mars, 99% I have seen only conflicts between the two brothers or between the siblings. All right. So you need to do some remedy to control the negative effects of Mars. All right. Again, third house deals with short journey. Okay, and Mars getting connected, retrograde Mars getting connected with third house means there will definitely be problem in all your short journeys. Okay, there would be delays, there would be irritation, conflicts. I have seen people having fights, hand fights. It may not lead to any kind of an accident, but definitely there would be conflicts, right? Also, the third house stands for your father-in-law. Okay, I have seen people having a retrograde Mars getting connected with the third house. They have a poor relationship with their father-in-laws. Okay, particularly father-in-law, not the mother-in-law, right? And again, if you have a retrograde Mars getting connected with the third house, you also have problems with your neighbors. Okay, there would be some conflict, some difference of opinion that can bother you, right? So these are some of the effects when you have retrograde Mars getting connected with the third house. Now let's see what happens when retrograde Mars getting connected with the fourth house, right? See, first understand, whenever fourth house stands for mother, vehicle, it also talks about properties. Okay, but I've also told you this in other videos. Fourth house alone cannot give you the result. It has to get connected with the planet. For example, fourth house with Venus leads to vehicle. Fourth house plus moon. We all should have a connection with moon and the fourth house in the natal chart, because we all come from a mother's womb, right? So moon itself stands for mother. When it gets connected with the fourth house, only then your mother plays a role with the fourth house, right? And when fourth house gets connected with Mars, it deals with property, landed property, right? So when you have a retrograde Mars getting connected with fourth house, there will be some Vastu dosh. I've seen many charts where they will have some Vastu dosh, some problem to do with the house. All right. Also, the south direction will have a problem. So if your house is facing the south direction, okay, do not go by this standard Vastu theory that south is always bad. No. That's a wrong theory. Vastu, in my view, cannot be read on its own. It needs to have the backing of astrology, because everything is written in your natal chart or in your Prashna Kundali. Okay, so it has to stand, or it has to be in alignment with these topics. Okay, so coming back to the point, retrograde Mars getting connected with the fourth house, you are going to have some Vastu dosh or Vastu related problem, and your south direction will have some trouble. Okay, again, even traveling towards south direction will be a problem. Okay, I missed this point when we spoke about the third house, but in general, yes, when you have a retrograde Mars getting connected with any of these houses, there will be travel related issues, right? Add to this, when you have a retrograde Mars getting connected with the fourth house, there is domestic pressure. See, fourth house is also your home environment, right? And if you have a Mars getting connected, any which ways it leads to problem. Add to that, if you have a retrograde Mars, bigger problem. There are instances where I've seen where you have a friction with your mother too. You don't respect your mother, neither your mother respects you. Though Mars doesn't deal with mother per se, but moon will always have a connection with fourth house, which I say. So indirectly, when moon and Mars gets connected, when they have a connection with the fourth house. So a retrograde Mars with the fourth house, you will also see problems with your mother. Okay. Now let's see what happens when retrograde Mars gets connected with fifth house. See, fifth house stands for progeny. It stands for kids. Okay, it also stands for creativity. It also stands for romance, right? There would be problems in all these areas if you have a retrograde Mars getting connected with the fifth house. Also, fifth house stands for bhakti, right? So when you have a Mars connection with the fifth house, any which ways the person is logical. But if you have a retrograde Mars getting connected with fifth house, the person is too logical. Okay, many times he will not even believe in God. He'll be too logical. Say, मुझे क्या फायदा मिल रहा है? Only then I will go to God. I've seen this in n number of cases, right? So whenever you have a retrograde Mars getting connected with the fifth house, these areas get affected. Okay. One more observation, this I have come over a period of time. See, when you have a retrograde Mars getting connected to the fifth house, and if you're a parent, okay, particularly if you have a male child, I've seen that parent physically abusing the child. I've seen them literally beating their child. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean it is an extreme expression of hatredness towards the child, but they try to discipline the child through a physical means, like, marrow and control them. Okay. It's not wrong, but, sometimes I don't agree to that principle. This is a personal opinion. I'm not putting anybody down. But this is my personal opinion. But yes, when you have a retrograde Mars connecting with the fifth house, I've seen the parents being too strict with their children. They also physically abuse most of the time, right? Now let's see what happens when retrograde Mars gets connected with the sixth house. This is actually a very dangerous place. Very dangerous place. Most people will say, no, sixth house Mars itself is generally good. All this, the Ugra planets should have connection with sixth house. See, it is good to give you a competitive edge, okay, but not too competitive, okay, because in this process I've seen many people, they hurt themselves. A lot of injuries takes place, especially if you're a sports player or if you're into any kind of an aggressive activity, adventure. If you have a retrograde planet, a retrograde Mars getting connected with the sixth house, invariably I've seen people meeting with some kind of an accident, some kind of cuts in the body, constantly facing those cuts. Okay, I've also seen problems where these people have they have an addiction also. Okay, addiction towards smoking, because Mars stands for heat, not heat exactly, it stands for fire. Okay, heat is symbolized by sun. Okay, so a retrograde Mars connecting with the sixth house, I've seen people being chain smokers. You can check the natal chart. You will find people having a constant habit of smoking. Okay, or some kind of an addiction where it will be too hot. Okay, some people consume too much of tea, too much of coffee, hot coffee, hot tea, garmi baby, hot coffee, hot tea. They will all get addicted towards these kind of practices, right? Now let's see what happens when retrograde Mars gets connected with the seventh house. This is again a very detrimental place. Okay, see, your sixth house, seventh house, eighth house, ninth house, tenth house are actually very important houses in your natal chart. All right, we'll talk about them individually, but whenever you have certain planets like Saturn, Mars getting connected with the seventh house, first of all, when Mars gets connected with the seventh house, you are a Mangalik. It's a very severe state of Mangalik position. Okay. And add to that, if you have a retrograde Mars getting connected with the seventh house, even more difficult to deal with your spouse, your opponents. People will always dominate you, or you will try to be aggressive towards them. There will be a friction, on and off there would be a friction, right? So it's not appreciable or admirable. And I've seen people having problems when they have retrograde Mars in the seventh house. It leads to multiple marriages. Your first marriage doesn't sustain, your second marriage also may not sustain because of your behavior or your partner's behavior. So seventh house Mars is always troublesome. Okay, preferably when it comes to matchmaking, I try to avoid taking such horoscopes, because even remedies has to be a lifelong remedy. So I don't know how long the person can be, honest towards the cause of taking up the remedy, right? Now let's see what happens. A retrograde Mars gets connected with the eighth house. See, eighth house and Mars means there would be some kind of a surgery. operations, what we say in the local language. And you undergo an operation, you undergo a surgery. This happens when you have a Mars getting connected with the 8th house. Now, if it is a retrograde Mars getting connected with the 8th house, I have seen repeated surgeries. Because Mars will not, a retrograde planet will not give a desired result. Add to this, a retrograde Mars will again not give a desired result. Worst, if you have a connection between Mars and the 6th house, 8th house, the ascendant, and again the Mars is retrograde, oh my God. Okay, I have seen repeated problems in their life, especially with health. I had a student, I don't want to name her, but she came from one of the African countries, and her father had a position in the foreign ministry. Okay, so she came to me for a birth time rectification because she did not know, and at the time of doing birth time rectification, I just checked with her, did your father undergo any kind of a surgery? Because when I was taking the ruling planet concept and trying to come closer to the timeline, she said, yes, my father has undergone some kind of an accident. And she threw me a challenge by asking, what kind of an accident? So he asked her, was there any weapon involved in hitting him? So she said, yes. He was shot with an AK-47 rifle, assault rifle. Thankfully, it was not fatal. It had a cut and he had a wound, okay, and the wound later led to cancerous growth, So, but yes, a retrograde Mars connecting with 6th house, 8th house, ascendant, the person is likely to suffer some kind of an injury, and that can be fatal in certain cases. Okay, so 8th house Saturn is always troublesome, Again, if you have 8th house Saturn, 8th house Mars getting connected with a retrograde, 8th house itself getting connected with a retrograde Mars, it's going to be even more problematic when it comes to marital relationships. See, many times people do not have interest to have kids if they have a retrograde Mars connecting with the 8th house. I have also seen in extreme cases repeated abortion taking place if you have a retrograde Mars getting connected with the 8th house, particularly in the women chart. So these are some of the problems that you will see with the retrograde Mars connecting with the 8th house. Now let's see what happens when you have a retrograde Mars connecting with the 9th house. 9th house is Bhagyasthan, your father, long-term journeys. It's also a Bhakti Sthan, All these areas will have problem. Definitely you will have problem. Though the plus is, normally when Mars gets connected with 9th house, people show interest towards engineering studies. Many people even pursue, okay. But some people will not complete their engineering course in the first attempt. Okay, so there can be some arrears to clear in the long run, right? Also, I have seen this problem, your spouse, especially if it's a male chart and you have a retrograde Mars getting connected with the 9th house, the spouse will be very careful while cutting vegetables, while using any sharp item, and the constant problem is they can get cuts and wounds in their fingers. Okay, so this is a very common problem when you have 9th house Mars getting connected, 9th house getting connected with a retrograde Mars. Okay, there is also a rough relationship with your father. Okay, these areas would need remedies, otherwise this problem can be persistent. Okay, now let's see what happens when the retrograde Mars gets connected with the 10th house. See, usually 10th house and Mars is an excellent combination. It's again a Raj Yoga. Okay, many people do not talk about that. When you have a 10th house Mars getting, when you have Mars getting connected with the 10th house, it means vertical growth. You're likely to reach the highest position at your workplace, right? But if you have a retrograde Mars getting connected with the 10th house, you still reach the high position, but after some obstacles. Okay, it is not that it is denied, but there is too much of exhaustion takes place before reaching the highest position, right? So that's one area of concern. It's again a concern, not a serious problem. This can be controlled. If you take up the appropriate remedy, you can definitely control it. Add to this, you will always have problems with your mother-in-law. There would be a tu meme between the mother-in-law and the concerned person. There would not be mutual respect. Again, this would need remedies to be taken into account. Okay. There is one more good thing is your spouse can come with a wealthy can come from a wealthy background. They may be somebody who will have too many properties in their name. Only problem is that they may have disputes in their property. So there could be family disputes in your spouse's when it comes to your spouse family, some family dispute where the property is involved, especially if you have a retrograde Mars gets connected with the 10th house, right? Now let's see again what happens when Mars gets connected with the 11th house. See, as I keep saying, 11th house is the house of desires, achievements, fulfillment of desire. And retrograde planet in most of these cases only delay it. It doesn't deny it, right? So there's nothing exceptional when it comes to retrograde Mars. But yes, in this case, what will happen, people who are older to you, they would be abusive towards you, right? Because 11th house is also the older people in age, right? And if you have a retrograde Mars gets connected with 11th house, definitely they would have a tendency to abuse. Okay, they can force you, they can bully you. In extreme cases, there can be even fights, hand fights. These are some things that you have to be careful with, right? So these are some problems when you have a retrograde Mars gets connected with the 11th house. Okay, lastly, when you have retrograde Mars getting connected with the 12th house. See, 12th house is the house of loss. Any planet in the 12th house is very badly placed. It means the energy of the planet is lost completely. Add to that, if it is retrograde, it loses even further, right? So, there can be hospital visits, which I've seen in charts. Hospital visits if you have a retrograde Mars getting connected with the 12th house. Again, it will not be detrimental, but even for the slightest purpose, you may have to visit the hospital. Okay, you may have sleep disorders, which is again very common. You may feel lonely sometimes. I've seen, the lack of desire, the lack of energy to deal with situations. So, a retrograde Mars 12th house has got these effects that I've mentioned, right? So, I hope this video has been interesting. I'll try to come out with more videos. Let me thank some of the audience who have given me encouraging comments in the Facebook post. Okay, but I would request you to kindly drop the same comments in the YouTube channel, so that more and more people can give me feedback. And this is an open platform, So if you're not happy with the content, probably I may have to rework with the content. So at least this gives me an encouragement as to what should be done. So let's have it in an open forum. Kindly post your comments on the YouTube channel, and this will again encourage me to come out with more and more tutorial videos on various topics in astrology. So I think this is what I had for today, and once again I would request you to subscribe and like the channel. And again, for consultation or for even learning astrology under me, you have the details of the description box. You can just drop me a WhatsApp message or drop me an email to the email ID, and from there we can take it forward, right? So for the day, I'm signing it off, and look forward. You can look forward for more videos in the coming days, right? Thank you.